Where do you see the most opportunities to add value as a real estate investor as it relates to the kind of renovations that you can put in place?
Your design approach should be to make your property look exactly the opposite of your competition. I would not spend any money in the kitchen and any money in the bathroom.
You can do it all and you won't get a hi-fi or a thank you from your guests, but you will get a bad review if you don't put it.
Go stay in your property for a week. What kind of experience do you have? People are booking vacations with their emotions, not just with analytics.
What are some things you would actually run away from if you're doing an inspection of a property and you're going to invest some money into renovating it? Is one red flag? What would that be? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. We bring in here leaders, entrepreneurs, operators in the space so that they can tell us about what they're seeing, what they've learned, the lessons, the insights, and the tips that could help you shorten the learning curve of becoming a more and more professionalized operator in the vacation rental space. So today I'm very excited to have Mark Lumpkin, the Director of Growth and Sales at STR Cribs, with us. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I've been a long-time listener. I've actually probably seen at least 100 of your shorts that you post on LinkedIn, and I've always enjoyed a lot of the guests you've had on. So I'm excited to be one of those guests myself.
I really appreciate that, man. It means a lot. It means a lot. And yeah, that's the idea of those choices, that you get tired of seeing my face in there. So let's get started. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, what's STR Cribs all about, and how did you get into this space?
Cool. Yeah, STR Cribs is pretty simple, man. We're a done for you, all-in-one renovation, design, and furnishing company. And so our goal at STR Cribs is that you can come to us with any property in any condition, and we can do everything that you need to do to that home in order to be guest ready and to be a top 1% earning property in any market. And so we're licensed general contractors, and we wrap that in with some great designs, furniture, amenities. If you've seen our properties, they're usually like the ones behind me. Super bright, colorful, amenity packed, fun, cool backyard. So that's really what we do on the crib side. Mm-hmm. And then how I got into this. So I've always had a love of traveling, and I kind of fell in love with traveling internationally in my early 20s with my wife. And it's kind of funny because we sought out to travel with like hotels or hostels or couch surfing even, and kind of those the traditional methods that a lot of younger people travel with. And we realized pretty quickly it just wasn't for us. We just didn't like it. And we wanted to have our own space and our own autonomy. And I love to cook, and so I wanted to have my own kitchen. And it was nice to be able to do laundry in our property that we were staying at as we were traveling a lot. And so we fell in love with Airbnb, actually. I don't know if before our first trip I had ever even really used the Airbnb app. But we've stayed in hundreds of properties now on Airbnb. We don't travel any other way other than kind of booking vacation rentals. Mm-hmm. And so I fell in love with the industry really as a traveler, and got to see what we liked and what we didn't like in certain properties, and started to implement that into a business and helping other hosts be successful and create great spaces.
Nice, man. Nice. And I think there's a lot that goes into, design and renovation. So why don't we start by sort of breaking that down in terms of let's say on the choice of like, okay, what amenities, right? What amenities you should try to have, in a property. Like, what's the process you guys normally go through to determine whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense to invest in a particular amenity? Like, how would you advise people to think through that?
Yeah, so you asked me to leave some good tips and tricks, and so I'm going to try to be really strategic with this answer. And it might be a boring way to answer, but I think that this is like, if you want to get some good insight from me, this is my takeaways for that. You'd probably need to do three things. One, you need to identify your guest avatar, who's coming to your house, who they are, why they're coming, how long they're staying, how old they are, how many of them there are, who's coming. Guest avatar is number one. Number two you need to identify your market. Okay. If you are in a beach town, you're probably going to have different amenities than someone who's in a ski resort town. Okay. What kind of market are you in? That also encompasses who's your competition. So within your market, what are your competitors doing? Okay.
Mhm.
And then three, you need to analyze your piece of real estate. How much space do you have? What kind of budget do you have? Do you have extra square footage that's unused that could be used for a game room? Do you have a huge backyard where you could put a pickleball court? Are you on the side of a mountain with killer views and no backyard? Like that piece of real estate that you're actually investing in is going to dictate what kind of amenities you can do. And so once you've drilled down those three things, what's your market, who's your guest avatar, and what advantages or disadvantages does your real estate have? I think that's when you can really formulate what amenities you can do. And
Mhm.
so if I have a cabin in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, that's on the side of a mountain with amazing views of the Smokies, no yard, but I have a huge deck, well, what can I do on that deck? It's probably going to be a hot tub, which is a checkbox amenity. Everyone in Gatlinburg has a hot tub. So
Mhm.
what can I do differently? I have to have a hot tub just to compete, but I want to do better than compete. I want to beat my competition. So do I do a barrel sauna? Do I do a cold plunge? Do I do some massaging chairs on the outside, a hammock? I don't necessarily know the exact answer to that question, but those are the questions you should ask yourself to find out the answer. Um,
Mhm.
am I in Tampa, Florida, or Orlando, where there's a lot of families traveling to the area with small kids? And do I have a huge backyard? Well, that might be a great opportunity for some fun outside amenities like a kid's playground or a kid's city or mini golf or bowling, just things that are fun and entertaining for families because
Mhm.
I'm in that market that families are traveling to. I have the yard space to accommodate those amenities. And maybe some of my competition are doing a few of those things. If they are, I'm guessing there's one of the better properties in the market. And then what are they not doing that I can add that will push me over their listing? So I hope
That
that
is,
wasn't
yeah.
too
No,
detailed, but yeah.
that's great. No, that's amazing. And I remember we were talking about the fact that you attended a virtual event earlier from STR Insights, and I remember going through the course from STR Insights on how to buy an STR property, and they talked about Kenny talked about the buy boxes, right, which are just groups of you know I would say like markets, but like even sub markets and a type of properties that you're analyzing. And so what you said there about looking at the competition, it's looking at what the top performers have in common, right? From a revenue perspective, that's the tricky part, right? With the amenities is like, when do you draw the line of what an amenity or whatever type of investment design wise you're putting in place in your property? Where do you draw the line of like whether it's actually gonna increase the property's revenue potential, or whether it's just gonna perhaps make it look way nicer without necessarily having a return component. So I think looking at the market like you said, but specifically looking at what the top performing properties in the market have in common, I think can be a good place to start, to your point.
Yeah, definitely. And to touch on that one, yeah, shout out to Kenny. They did an awesome event. If he's listening to this, the STR Scale Summit virtual event. I hope they do it again. But two, I think that the hospitality industry is a little bit of art and a little bit of science. And so that's where there's a lot of kind of unknowns where I can't tell you, hey, putting a game room in your home is going to directly drive a 20% ROI and you're going to get 8,000 more dollars a year in bookings. Okay. There's not necessarily an exact formula for that you
Mm-hmm.
might see in other investing categories, right? If you're doing long-term rentals, you can look at a market and say 3 bedrooms rent for 1,200 and 4 bedrooms rent for 1,350. So I know that
Mm-hmm.
fourth bedroom makes an extra $150 a year. It's just set in stone, right? Because people are booking vacations with their emotions, not just with analytics. And
Mm-hmm.
they see something that gets them excited and they fall in love with just the house or the stay itself. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily have a black and white answer to say, hey, all of these amenities drive this exact number of ROI. So your
Mhm.
best bet is to do a few things. One, you can amenity stack. So you can do a handful of amenities at a time, not just one. And I talked about that cabin in Gatlinburg. Well, maybe the hot tub is a great amenity to have, but if you pair that with a barrel sauna and swinging chairs and a coffee bar, and you create this experience where
Mhm.
your guest thinks, hey, this is a spa like experience, and then they become emotionally attached to your property because of all of the things that you offer, you then have a much higher chance of capturing that guest and that those dollars that they're going to spend. So amenity stacking can really help you um, capitalize on people spending money and wanting to stay at your property. And then the next thing I would say would really just be to see that competition, what they've done and what's working out for them, and try to do better than them. If you can find a property that you want to beat, well, what do they have? Okay, that's your baseline. You at least need what they have, and then you've got to go one or two steps further to beat that competition.
Yeah, no, those are great points. Those are great points because it's true that I remember as an example of what you were saying, having a tech vestor on the show, which is they're buying hundreds of properties and putting them as short term rentals and whatnot. And one example I believe was they had added a golf simulator in one
Mm-hmm.
of their properties, and they said what you just said, which is like we didn't know how much more revenue a golf simulator would produce. I mean, it's not like you have hundreds of properties that have exactly that kind of a unique amenity. But it was kind of like it's the art that you're talking about. It's like experimenting, testing it out, and it turns out like they were saying that it did perform extremely well, right? So how do you would have never known if you hadn't tried. So I guess
That's right.
that's part of the conversations you need to have with your with the homeowners that are wanting to use your services. Is like, okay, well, what's your budget, and where do you draw the line? What would you say, to someone that's coming in? Like, how do you determine what's a minimum viable budget for the kind of let's say, renovations or even design work that you guys do? Does it depend on where the property is starting from? Does it depend, like, do you use a rule of thumb as a percentage of the purchase price, or how do you normally go about telling your clients how they should think about this?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer because it's very much a case by case basis.
Sure.
You could buy a $600,000 house that's move in ready in a market it's brand new and needs very limited renovations, or you could buy a $600,000 house in another market that's completely dilapidated and is uninhabitable and needs a complete gut job. And so it's
Do you guys
definitely a
have a
hard.
minimum? Do you guys have a minimum, like where you guys would come in, like
I,
if,
I would
if the
say,
property's
yeah, I'd
almost
say
ready, like we won't touch it because it's just almost there.
Yeah, no, we don't necessarily have a minimum, but we do kind of have an average, and we see our investors spending anywhere between about 150 and $200,000 invested into the property between the renovations, the amenities, all the furniture, the essentials, photos, everything you need to do to take it from empty to guest ready. That's
Okay.
probably the average. But no, there's definitely some projects that only need 50 or 60 grand, and there's another house that I looked at today that's about to fall over and it needs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so,
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. So what does, as simple as that might sound, what is the checklist for a property to be completely guest ready? So, like, what are the things that, let's keep the basics, like, but what are some things that you guys think must be in a property for it to be guest ready at the level that you guys want it to be, but that perhaps most people don't always consider?
yeah, that's a good question. I'll start with the essentials. So your cups, plates, towels, linens, trash cans, all that stuff. I would say our list is rather extensive. I know there's a lot of people online that talk about rental arbitrage or this is the cheapest way you can get into it. You go to Walmart and you buy one set of cups and plates and you buy two towels per guest and you buy one set of sheets and they do it for on a very minimal basis.
Mm-hmm.
Our approach is quite the opposite, which
Mm-hmm.
is that if you're going to drive high ROI and if you're going to get people, large groups, and get people to pay a high dollar amount to stay in your property every night, you don't need the bare minimums. You need a home that's well stocked, and you
Mm-hmm.
need at least two or three sets of cups and plates per guest. And so if you have a 15 guest count, that might mean you need 30 forks and 30 knives and 30 plates and 30 cups, because you need at least two or three per guest. And so there's a lot of essentials that go into it. And then I always like to think about it as like, what do you need to cook a spaghetti dinner for your family? Well, one pan and one pot does not cook a full meal comfortably for a family of 10. And so, put yourself in the shoes of your guest. If you had your whole family there and grandma and grandpa are there and mom and dad and cousins and we're staying on a vacation and I want to make dinner for everybody, well, I need a well-stocked kitchen and I need extra towels. And if someone gets, if one of the kids spills juice all over the bed sheets, I need a second set of bed sheets that I can trade out. And so there's a lot that goes in just to the essentials as well, because we're not thinking about it as the bare minimum. We're thinking about it as a well-stocked home that will make your guests feel really comfortable and have everything that they need and some. And so that's just the essentials, right? And then you get into your furniture. Well, how many people are you going to sleep? However many people you're going to sleep, you need to be able to eat those same amount of people. I can't tell you how many times I see listings that sleep 10, 8, 12 guests, and they have a dining room table that has 4 chairs. Are people supposed to eat in shifts? Are people supposed to sit on the floor? If you've got a 10 guest count, you need a dining room table that can sleep 10. You need a couch that has some configuration to where a majority of your guests can sit there and watch a movie in the evening. You really want to think strategically about even just your furniture and how many guests you're accommodating throughout the house. Do you have an outside seating area? Do you have an outside dining room table? Well, does that accommodate your full guest count? So thinking about that from the furniture perspective, I think is really, really important. Um, and then to me too, there's a lot of the basics that are missed. And so, to touch on the point of takeaways on this, think about a bedroom. Well, are blackout curtains important in a bedroom? Of course they are. It's a hospitality standard. No hotel has a bedroom that doesn't have blackout curtains, but most short-term rentals don't have blackout curtains. Well, why is that? It's because the people that are setting up the homes don't have a background or a history in hospitality, and so they're not even thinking about blackout curtains. You've got guests that are traveling from all around the world, different time zones. You've got people that travel with kids and need a place to nap. And so really even just getting down to the basics with our property owners is really important as well. And so I could answer that question for an hour, but that's
No,
just
man,
some of
keep
the things we
going. And
think about.
if you have more stuff, that's great. That's definitely good advice that you just gave. And the thing with those fundamentals is that the guest will, some of them, they won't notice it if it's there, but they'll definitely notice it if it's not, right? Which is the
Yep.
tricky part, right? Like some of those basics is like, yeah,
Yeah.
you can do it all, and you won't get a high five or a thank you from your guest for it, but you will get a bad review if you don't put it.
Definitely, definitely. And I love the word you use, fundamentals. And I remember I coached an 8th grade boys basketball team a couple years ago, and that's all we did. We were practicing making layups and passing the ball to each other and not dropping it out of bounds, right? We were just focused on the basics because we hadn't mastered that. And I would say that's my advice for anyone who's listening to this is, yes, what we do is amazing neon signs and games and amenities and bright, and we just have these houses that are incredible. Before you get into that, if you just master the basics, having blackout curtains and an extra set of sheets and a barbecue that works, a Wi-Fi that actually is accessible, like even just the most simple stuff, you got to focus on that on day one. And if you can't master the basics, you're not ready for any of the next steps.
I'm sure you must have seen a recent increase in demand Well, I don't know if you would agree with this, but in demand in your services, I mean, at least from an anecdotal perspective, I hear a lot of operators and hosts talking about the elevation of the guest standards, and how, before, the approach that you were mentioning of like just going and putting together a place as cheap as possible, like that used to work, whereas now it's not enough, and OTAs are making it harder and harder, and suspending reviews and whatnot. Like, what's the shift you've seen from that side, as far as like what used to be acceptable from a design and amenities perspective versus what's acceptable, quote unquote, nowadays?
Yeah, that's a good question. I agree in everything you just said, and we've definitely seen a shift. I've kind of been preaching this for maybe, I don't know, a couple of years, 2 or 3 or 4 years, about what we call the amenities arms race, which is that people who are setting up the best properties and are very amenity heavy and are offering a unique experience are going to inevitably win over the old way of doing short-term rentals, which was really just kind of a air mattress and a hot plate. And we've seen a handful of folks ahead of the curve where they saw it coming and they set their property up and they're doing really, really well. But we are seeing a lot of people kind of trying to play catch up and saying, hey, I really did well in 2020, 2021, 2022. But man, the last year or two has been really tough. And I'm thinking about selling this place. I just can't compete anymore. And so my advice is always, all right, well, look at your competition, go stay in your property. That's one of my best pieces of advice. Go stay in your property for a week. And what kind of experience do you have? Are the beds comfortable? Well, we know that guests spend 60%. Host GPO came out with the stat that guests spend 60% of the time in their home in the bed, sleeping. So if you don't have comfortable beds, you're in trouble. And do you have blackout curtains? And do you have enough kitchen utensils to actually comfortably make a meal? Not scrap it together. I could scrap together a meal in a hotel kitchen. I paid a premium for this house so that I could have a nice kitchen to cook in. And spend a week. And if you at the end of the week realize, man, that wasn't a great stay. I'm missing this, this, and this. There's no hair dryer. There's no this. There's no that. Well, those are the basics. So master the basics. Elevate the experience your guests are going to have before you even think about doing anything else.
Yeah, no, that's great. Staying at your property. I mean, fundamental again. Like, and you'd be surprised, right? How many things you can find by just doing that one thing. Like, yeah, not great, great. Now we talked about design briefly and amenities. Now, what about the renovation part of it? So, where do you see the most opportunities to add value, right, as a real estate investor, as it relates to the kind of renovations that you can that you can put in place? Like, would you say start with the kitchen, or the bathrooms, or like always look for, I don't know, new bedroom opportunities? Like, what are the things you see the most there?
Yeah, I love that. I'm so glad that you asked, that you started with saying start with the kitchen and the bathroom. I would do the opposite, and I would not spend any money in the kitchen and any money in the bathroom.
Okay, interesting.
It's and it's such a controversial statement coming from a contractor, because that's just the collective wisdom and knowledge of the real estate industry. You spend
Uh-huh.
your money in your bathrooms and your kitchens. That's where you have the highest ROI, and that's where the most increase in your value comes from. Short-term rentals is quite the opposite. We've seen that instead of spending 30 grand on a kitchen remodel, you're better off adding a game room, bedroom addition in the garage, or a couple of amenities in the backyard, because guests aren't necessarily booking your place because the kitchen is beautiful and has marble countertops and da 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 da. As long
Hmm.
as the kitchen is clean and looks decent and they know it's there and it's functional, it's well stocked, they're
Yeah.
going to be fine. And so, what I would always encourage people to do is look in your market and look at the first 5 photos of the first 5 pages of listings. I guarantee you that none of them are of the bathrooms and none of them are of the kitchen. And why is that? Because the guests don't care about the bathroom and the kitchen. They know that there's a bathroom and a kitchen there. They're going to go to the bathroom and the toilet, and they're going to brush their teeth in the sink. And then they're going to spend the rest of their time enjoying your fun amenities and the other things you provide in the house. So There's a reason no one's putting kitchens and bathrooms as their listing photo, and they're putting the primary bedroom, they're putting the backyard space, they're putting that game room or that huge living room that has the giant projector TV. Like all those things are at the
Hmm.
top of the list for advertising your property. So that's where you should be putting your money, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's a great point. And what are, talking about renovations, what are some of the best practices that you guys try to follow to stay on budget? Because I think that that's a little bit of a challenge sometimes that people might be facing if they are working with contractors, is like, how do you how do you ensure the budget is respected, and like, yeah, what kind of best practices do you guys follow when it comes to that? Do you try to buy materials in bulk, or are there certain providers that you just, because of all the volume you guys do, that gives you economies of scale, or like, what kind of monitoring happens to make sure that this is, again, this doesn't end up exceeding the budget that had been originally pre-established?
Yeah, that's a good question. We work in a bunch of different markets across the country, and so it is a little hard to, like you said, buy materials in bulk or scale like that and receive
Mhm.
discounts. I would say how we're best at managing budgets is we prioritize where the money should be spent. And
Mhm.
so by saying no to certain things, hey, you've got 2.5 bathrooms. I know you'd like to add another bathtub and shower and get to three full bathrooms, but your 10 guests will probably be fine with 2.5 bathrooms. So saying no to very expensive and costly renovations and prioritizing that money on the stuff we talked about, the amenities, things like that, it definitely helps us keep our costs down and
Mhm.
makes the most of your budget, because a hot tub is going to cost what a hot tub is going to cost, right? There's not typically going to be any surprises, right? We know that you got to run the 220 electrical. We know that you've got to pour the concrete pad. We know you got to order the hot tub and install it. Da 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 da. But that doesn't necessarily, a $10,000 hot tub never turns out to be a $30,000 hot tub, right? So we can kind of control those costs because a lot of times there are amenities that we've done over and over again. And so we know what it takes to install and implement those things. But if you tear apart kitchen cabinets and then you realize that the cost of wood, I did this on a house I remodeled for myself. I gutted a kitchen, I started remodeling it. I called a couple custom cabinet makers, and that was right at the time that the cost of lumber around COVID was just absolutely skyrocketing. And my cabinets ended up costing me 3 times as much to replace those cabinets as they did at the beginning, because lumber was, it was crazy. I don't know if you remember, but a 2x4 was like $12. So
Mhm.
those major remodel decisions are where you run into a lot of overages when renovating a property. And our business model would be more along the lines of, hey, let's maybe just paint these cabinets and replace the hardware. And we know that it's going to cost this much to paint the cabinets. We're not going to run into any issues. And we know that new drawer pulls cost $1 a piece. There's not going to be any issues there with major overages. And so I think that's how we do a great job staying on budget and mitigating huge overages, is because we're really strategic about what we're doing. And we don't just say yes to everything. We don't just recommend that people completely gut their house and start over. We want you to make strategic decisions in the property.
And in the case of the property of yours that you were mentioning, was that an STR, or was
That
it
was a
where?
house for it was a house for me.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Got
Yeah,
it,
it was
got
a
it, got it,
primary residence.
got it. Yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, especially with major renovations, that's where it can get scary, because you're committing to it upfront, but then you don't know precisely, to your point, are is the cost of materials going to go significantly up? So it's really about, partnering up with someone that knows what they're doing. I think that's the key aspect. And you know if you don't know about renovations, I'm the worst at anything that has to do with the physical aspects of renovations, construction. Like, I would need a partner for that, right? Like, but for us, it's all the digital. We do revenue, we do pricing, we do listings. So I think it really comes down to knowing your strengths and your weaknesses. I'm sure you've heard a lot of horror stories of people that tried doing this themselves to save a couple of bucks, and it ended up costing them twice as much.
Yep, definitely. And I also talk to people all the time who maybe made decisions that I wouldn't have recommended they made when we look through their property and they say, yeah, we just spent 30 grand retiling the shower, and we just took this deck and did this beautiful metal railing all the way around and da 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 da. And I look at it and I go, man, that's a beautiful deck, but you spent 50 grand to build the deck, and then you spent $2,000 to go buy all the furniture and a crummy barbecue. And you did it the opposite. You should have just painted the deck and restained it and left it how it was, and spent a bulk of your money going all out on the furniture and having swinging chairs and a hammock and a cornhole game and a great big huge barbecue, because your guests, they don't care if they're sitting on a $5,000 deck or a $50,000 deck, but they do care if they're sitting in a nice, comfortable, reclining chair that has enough seating for their whole family, or if they're sitting in a Walmart pieced together crummy chair that's falling apart and is rusted and is uncomfortable. And I think that's where we see the biggest disconnect, is people are spending their money in the wrong places and they're not thinking about what their guests are thinking about. Because your guests don't care that they're standing, that their 3-minute shower happens in a $30,000 tiled shower. They just don't care about that. But they do care if there's a really nice, comfortable hot tub in the backyard that they can enjoy a nice glass of wine in at the end of the evening after they just spent all day at Disney World with their kids, right? That's more important than the really nice shower.
No, that's
not what we think about for our houses, right? You know, I oftentimes just see people making decisions that they want to see in the home. Oh, I don't like this. I don't like that. Well, it doesn't really matter. And I have a great story of this, right? I'm guilty of this myself. We had a guest at one of my properties message and ask about televisions. And they said, hey, are there TVs in all the bedrooms? And we had a TV in the living room. We had a TV in the master bedroom, but there was 3 bedrooms that didn't have TVs in them. And I looked at my wife and I said, why do they need TVs in all the bedrooms? Like, this is a beach house. Go outside, walk on the sand, enjoy the beach. You're on vacation. And she said, well, Mark, that's your own bias because you don't watch TV, and it doesn't matter what. And she said it to me. She said my line back to me. She said, it doesn't matter what you want. These are our guests, and they're asking if it has televisions, and they haven't booked the house yet. It's a request to book because they don't want to book it unless it has TVs in all the bedrooms. And then it kind of really clicked for me, and I went, okay, you're right. Doesn't matter what I want. Our guests are asking for TVs in the bedrooms, and TVs only cost a few $100s. So we went and got TVs and put them in all the bedrooms, and now all of my properties always have TVs in all the bedrooms because that's what guests want. Doesn't matter that it's not what I want.
It is a great point, man. I do a lot of reviews of listings for people where I'll look at their listing and we'll give them feedback on what they could improve. And I always say, when it comes to the choice of the first photo, the hero image, doesn't matter what I like or what you like. What matters is what picture is going to give us the highest conversion rate. So I think it comes down to the same, right? It's really shifting the mindset. It's not the place where you're going to live. It's a place where your guests are going to stay. And that's what you should be thinking about. That's a great point. Now, what about the design aspect is, now we're leaning on the artistic side, and that's where, I'm really outside of my comfort zone, because I think if you had me decorate or, design a place, I think that'd be the most awful mistake you would make. You don't want to you don't want to see that. You don't want to do that. But yeah, it's a bit more abstract, right? There's less like rules of thumb or things that you can say, oh well, this is what good design should look like. But if you were to try to tell us, like, what are some of the principles, if we can call them like that, about your design approach, what are some of those things? I mean, you mentioned lighting earlier. That must be one. What else?
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty simple statement, and it's actually an easy question to answer. Your design approach should to make your property look exactly the opposite of your competition. And so if I pull up a mountain town right now on Airbnb, and we'll just say Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and we look at the first page of that Airbnb together. I bet you all 20 of the properties on the first page almost look exactly the same. I can just picture them in my mind right now. There's a brown leather couch in the living room. There is some cute little black bears artwork somewhere. There is one bedroom that has the mountain themed wallpaper that has like the mountain in the background with the Smoky Mountains. And I mean, I'm serious, man. If we did that, that would be what the first 20 properties would look like on the page. And they all start to blend together. And so if I was opening a property in that town, I would do the exact opposite. I would have a bright blue couch. Or, I mean, don't take this as gospel, but I would just do something that was so different and so unique that when you were scrolling through, you would want to stop and look at my property because my property looks different than everyone else's. And so that would be the initial approach that I would take to designing a property. I would look at the competition and I would make sure that whatever design style I went for was bold and was very different from everyone else. Okay. Mm-hmm. I would also incorporate certain things, certain elements. Like you said, I really like the custom neon signs. I think they're cool. They photograph really well. I love accent walls and wallpaper in bedrooms. It's a way to take a room, like even the room that's behind me, right? There's blue on all the walls, but then there's an accent wall that really pops and is bright in color and opens up the room and catches your eye. I would do full length mirrors. You know, that they kind of get rid of that awkward little corner in a bedroom where there's nothing there. They're a nice amenity to have. People like to make sure that they look good before they go out, especially when they're on vacation. They photograph well. They reflect light into the room, making the room feel bigger. So those are just some easy tips that I would go for. I've got a bunch of those on my YouTube channel if you want to follow my YouTube channel where I kind of talk about a bunch of design tips. But the goal is your house looks very different, and then there are a lot of cool elements and strategic things that you can do within that design that people enjoy and photograph well. Like you just said, that hero shot, that photo is the most important thing. And so I hate to say it, but there might be some things that you do that when you're in the house, you're like, man, this isn't amazing. I don't love this. It's a little bit awkward. Maybe it's not the best use of the space, but it photographs really well. Well, that's what's selling. There's no test drives in short-term rentals. People are booking off of an online viewing based upon the photographs. So how things photograph is the most important thing to your listing.
I love that. And I love the mindset of like, just have something that's different from what you see out there. Because it is a game of standing out for sure, especially when there's so much inventory and when that inventory is growing more and more every time. Mark, tell me a little bit about your background as an actual real estate investor, because you were talking about the property of yours where you did have guests and whatnot. So how did you get started on that side?
Yeah, so it's actually started when I was relatively young. I had bought a house. I flipped a couple houses and had done a few of those on my own. It was a great experience. It was kind of one of those things where I buy a place that was the worst house in the best neighborhood, spend a year or two doing all the renovations myself, teaching myself how to do floors and tile and showers and paint and cabinets and things like that. And I'd done pretty well. I'd been able to kind of build a little portfolio and flip some houses and make some money and travel and do some fun things that maybe not everyone can do in their 20s. And then recently, me and my wife have been hyper focused on acquisitions of short-term rentals and doing the deal, analyzing the markets, figuring out what the competition looks like, what are the best places to be, what are the best house sizes to get. And so we have a few homes. We're super hosts. We manage our own properties as well, and those are going well. But yeah, just always trying to, like, I think like everyone that would be listening to this, always trying to learn, add more properties, get more cash flow, and playing the game of Monopoly.
Love it. And what's been your financing strategy or I guess your acquisition strategy? Like what is it that you have found that works best for you? Like are you looking for single family properties? Are you looking at at really touristic destinations, or more so urban destinations, because you want to have a mix of, like, you can do long term and mid term. Like, what's your ideal, what does an ideal short term rental investment look like from your eyes, from your perspective?
For me, it's very much a single family residence in a hot tourist market, like Florida or like the Poconos or wherever. Um, and then a larger house too. So I'm always looking at, can we accommodate two different families at once? Um, can we have 20 people in the house? So extra bedrooms, extra square footage, single family in a hot tourist market. I don't want to have a house out in the middle of nowhere where I'm not sure if that market's proven. I definitely want to be in a market that I know a lot of people are traveling to. And
Hmm.
up to now, it's just kind of been, make the down payment, get the financing ourselves. And I know there's a lot of opportunities out there to partner up with other folks. And I've definitely started to explore that, but I don't have any experience in any syndications or any partnerships or anything like that. It's just been us solely investing.
Hmm. 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 And because of your experience flipping properties in the past, have you tried the Burr method? Like, have you been into, like, okay, I'm buying this, I'm renovating it, and then I'm gonna refinance, and that you used to buy the next, or what's been your strategy on that side of, on the value add side of things?
Yeah, I haven't done any of that personally. I've definitely seen a lot of our clients at STR Cribs do it and do it really, really well and have a lot of success. And so I would say, yeah, my experience flipping some houses and doing some remodels myself has definitely played into what we're doing at STR Cribs, which is that kind of, it's really just a vision where you can look at a property and say, hey, I know it looks really, really bad now, but just wait until we're done with it. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And so that's been really fun to implement that experience there. But no, I haven't done any of that personally.
And flippers always have that eye that you're referring to, where they can see, okay, now there's potential here, when a normal person would just run away, right? What are some things you would actually run away from if you're doing, an inspection of a property, and that you're going to invest some money into renovating it and putting it up to speed, so it's a value add project, but, like, the moment you identify this one red flag, you run away. What would that be?
The one red flag, that's a hard question to answer. I don't know if
Like,
there's,
something, whatever comes to mind, not
yeah,
not doesn't have to be just one thing, but, like.
yeah, I think that for the short term rental game, a lot of times the big red flags I see are things that are just so time consuming. So it's like, this pool is awful. We've got to tear it's completely dilapidated. We've got to completely remove it and install an entire new pool. And we're coming into winter. And when you start looking at the timeline, you're like, man, this is a 10-month project. And so then if this house could generate $10,000 a month in income as a short-term rental, and another house down the street that doesn't have a 10-month project and only has a 3-month project is similar, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, because that extra 7 months is going to cost you $70,000 in lost revenue. And so I think the big red flags that I see, and for investors we work with, are just projects that are so time consuming and labor intensive that it doesn't make sense, because maybe you're getting a $50,000 discount on the real estate because it has this big project, but this big project is adding 5 months to your timeline at $10,000 a month in lost revenue. It just doesn't pencil out. You might as well buy the property that doesn't have that big project, because you can launch it so much quicker and use that time to generate income for yourself.
Yeah, man, it's speed, man. Speed is so crucial, right?
Speed, definitely.
Love it. That's a great point. Well, listen, Mark, this has been great. I think this has been very insightful. This has been very practical. I really, really appreciate your input and insights. Any closing thoughts? And if not, where can people stay in touch and connect?
Yeah, you and me are both super active on LinkedIn, so you can follow me on LinkedIn, send me a DM. I'll give you my email if you want to share it in the show notes. And I think my message would just be that we believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. And we want to be a great resource for anyone in the short-term rental space. Even if you don't utilize our services, grab some time with me, shoot me an email, ask me any questions. We're happy to give advice like you do all the time. We're happy to look at your listing and point out maybe some things that you can do to improve it. And the game is changing, and we want to help kind of lead the charge to make sure that investors are seeing, ROI. They're getting a return on their investment. This is a really hard industry to be in, and it sucks when you're not making any money. And so we want to make sure that we help people with some of the knowledge and wisdom we've learned, and we're happy to do that for free.
And by the way, you mentioned you have a YouTube channel. What's the YouTube channel so people can check it out? Because I think they're going to want more of the advice you just shared.
Yeah, it's just STR Cribs. So just type in STR Cribs, you'll find us. And we post a couple times a week with just free educational information. So
awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark. It was great to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.